Hello there, I'm Mont27p, the creator of Mineshaft, here with a bit of a behind the scenes into the making of my recent animation. I'll be going into some things on the story, world, general production, and a few other things which may pique people's interest. Mineshaft was my first animation on the Black Plasma channel, which I started working on pretty soon after I applied at the start of the year. Early production for things like brainstorming I believe started in mid-January. Started out by brainstorming a few different stories or features I could explore. The two main concepts I ended up going with was a mineshaft and an earthquake. In the end I basically just combined them. I had a few different docs organising the story in dot points, sometimes even going into more complex forms. The giant slime is essentially the cause of everything. After losing the baby slime, the giant ends up stressing out, causing multiple earthquakes. Steve and Alex, who are passing above, venture out to explore the exposed mineshaft and discover the cause of the earthquake. The pair both go through different experiences as they are separated, Steve having less fortunate experiences for majority. Later on, when Steve falls into an open area, the cause of the earthquake is exposed to him, who slowly looks up as the ground shakes. This I feel could have been exaggerated a little more. I saw a few people were a little confused later on as to why they were chasing this random slime. Reuniting the slime with the mother calms her down, and they both travel off, concluding Alex and Steve's adventure. In the end though, we see the baby slime once again decided to follow them, agitating the mother again, who comes crashing through the village. And they all die. Kidding, no. I think there were some interesting concepts in here though, like the earthquake forming the ravines. I probably could have had a bit more of a lead up into the giant slime though. While story elements were being finished, I went looking for maps. I started by doing a bit of searching online. I ended up stumbling across an old map with a ravine running through the village. I regenerated the seed because of a few problems. The ravine was gone, but there was a nicer village in its place. I knew I probably wouldn't be able to find the perfect map with a village, ravine and mineshaft next to each other, so I ended up looking into modifying it myself. This map had so many ravines within such a small space, which is why this map worked out so well. I essentially ended up joining two ravines together and using that as one long one. I flattened out the area around the village in World Painter, which ended up creating some strange trees on the edges. World Edit then played a large part here, brought over the ravines, modelled the world back together, then went and searched for a mineshaft and essentially did the same thing with World Edit, before doing a few cleanups and doing additional things like lamps, which I added for light sources. Interestingly, in the end, there were technically 3 ravines connected right next to each other, with the third being right below the entrance. I wish I recorded some of the process, would have been cool to see it all come together. Then I went and built a few extra areas in the world, including a few towns and outposts, paths, and a pea field, which is totally full of peas. After all that, it was time to get into the animation production. Animation started out with a layout pass, in which I'd have characters slide around the scenes to get the general flow. It actually took me a while to get through all the layout for this animation. I'm pretty sure I spent upwards of 2 months on it. Eventually I was able to get right into the core animation stage. I'm still balancing animation with my last year of school, so it's been a balancing act. So, scene 1. We have a small earthquake take place in the opening, foreshadowing the later events. The bread here actually used to be an apple. Don't know why I said that, but now you know. Lighting wise, I went for a midday type feel, nicer turquoise colours for the mist, few warmer colours for the sun. At this point I did dramatically change around the way I lit and composited scenes compared to before Black Plasma, which provides to be an interesting comparison. Scene 2. Alex and Steve stumble into the village, do a bit of trading while we get to see a bit of the village activity. This wasn't the same village that we seen Villager raid in Ocean Monument though. Earthquake time! The earthquake was really fun to play with. I ended up basically splitting the world into 2, then parenting half of the divided world onto an axis, which would allow me to move apart and create the ravine. I then filled in the gaps with different blocks and played around. I ended up manually animating each individual block, snapping, reacting and falling. This was a rather tedious process, but I felt it was definitely worth it, considering I wouldn't be able to get the same result if I just used a physics system. I then also had a few particles on the initial break, which added a little more detail. The same thing was basically done here for the ravine at the opening, just on a smaller scale. I don't think there's too much on scene 3. They arrive at the entrance of the mineshaft, they choose their paths as we see them start their own adventures. Steve is less fortunate as we see Alex's calm path. The minecart itself was the original default flat minecart found in Minecraft, but then ZophieCat sent me a really cool rig which allowed me to play around with more movements, so thanks to her on that. Oh, the spiders, how could I forget? The spiders make their first appearance. Both the spiders and slimes I actually really enjoyed animating. I did manually animate the spiders' legs to make sure they stayed in their position after each frame, but it was satisfying to see it all come together, so I think it was all worth the time. A lot of people really seem to like the spider stuff, so I'm glad I enjoyed putting in that extra time. Coming into the underground stuff, I had to look around how I was going to light everything. In pre-production, as I mentioned, I built extra lamps in areas to add to the natural light sources like torches and lava. Adding these extra sources I think also helped with filling in the pitch black areas in the background to add a little more depth and colour. Generally though, I resorted mainly to using spotlights to light subjects. I reckon I could have tried having a few higher contrasts though. Some areas were a little flat, I feel. Another element were the particles, something that I probably didn't use in moderation for most of the part. Fly, my particles, fly! Particles though were pretty fun to play with. Scene 4! Music wise, I think this was the first song I was definite on using. I personally thought it fit perfectly as soon as I started brainstorming for this section. There was also an interesting cut here using the fence post. Steve's bad luck continues through this montage, which was one of the main elements of this animation. He only towards the end got his fair share of adventure when Alex was trapped in the webs. The effects around the mysterious stew were interesting. For Alex, I primarily played around with the compositing, some contrast and clearing up the surroundings to represent night vision. Steve's was a combination of compositing and effects. I had this 2D plane surrounding the camera with a gradient controlling this black material as it enshrouded the screen. I imagined it a little different, but I think it served its purpose. The little section where Steve's light goes out was actually two separately rendered sections. You can kind of see the fade between the two clips if you look closely as the mobs pop in. At the end, this is where Steve falls into the open area where the giant slime lies. I probably could have exaggerated a shadow or something, which I did attempt with this weird bouncy cube. Scene 5! The hunt for the slime begins. Alex here is unaware that the giant is the cause of the earthquake, but still helps Steve out. Another early idea here I think worked really well. I wanted to include a shot similar to those comedic moments with people running in and out of different doors, and this platform area worked perfectly. I added a few extra characters in the background, including both Yi, Derb, and even Grim. Once Steve finally catches up and kills the zombies, he earns the slime's trust, taking him back to reunite with the mother. Alex eventually falls back down from a slow adventure, missing the whole slime encounter. After all the adventure is over, they return to the village. I do want to mention here, they do not climb up the entire distance of the ravine. The camera actually hides the blocks which they use to tower themselves up to the surface. While developing the story, it was also proposed to end on them returning the slime. Personally, I wanted to go for a bit more of a comedic ending, so I hope that came across well in the end. There are a lot of small details I feel I could have added had I spent more time on effects, but there were a few nice details of the falling trees, leaves and so on. That ended the animation stage, brought in skins, did final touches and so on. Before BPS, I used to render a good chunk of stuff myself. I probably did like 1% of this project with my 30-minute render times. I also got a lot of help from the Lord of Ice, who probably ended up rendering a good minute plus some extra scenes like bloopers, so massive thanks there. I eventually got into editing and sound design. Most sound stuff I used from Epidemic, which is where we get most of our music. Music-wise, I felt I kind of struggled with. There were a few sections which I was a little concerned about, like when Alex jumps off the ravine and the ending song which may have not fit. Editing in general though is something I do enjoy. Thumbnail-wise, towards the end of production I got in and designed a few different thumbnails. There are a lot of concepts which weren't even complete, but I found quite interesting to get in and see what best fits. Then it was up to uploading, watching reactions, reading comments, and seeing how it all goes. So that concludes the behind the scenes for Mineshaft, my first animation on the Black Plasma channel. I've learnt a lot in the process, which has been exciting. There's certainly things like the story depth which I could be looking at along with other points. I'm open to any feedback or suggestions people have. Overall, I hope people did enjoy it and are excited for future projects from other animators. There's a few separate videos I'm wanting to do around the production of Mineshaft, probably more on my personal channel, but otherwise, hope you all look forward to other animations. On that note, I will depart. Bye. I don't know, man. 16 minutes. I don't want 16 minutes. I don't want 16 minutes. I'm just gonna keep recording because I don't like that. I'm probably gonna cut all of it out. I don't know.